give them this important information at the conclusion of today's event. And I just also thought for those of you that might be new to the key customer events, we just wanted to let you know briefly the purpose of the program is to pull together by volume our largest by use customers and share with you information about your water utility. We also do ask you to keep contacts up for your facilities in case we do ever have a water quality event or things like that. We send those notices out by email. And at the conclusion of today's event, I'll put a Google form up for you to, or a Microsoft form for you to help us make sure that we have the current contacts for your organization. And with that, I'll just give you a little rundown of the agenda. You're going to hear from three people here today. Our Chief Executive Officer, Tom Hickman. He's new to the organization, but started about 6 months before the pandemic, so we did not get him before you in person. So we know for many of you, it'll be the first time. And as you saw, there's some connections out here in the community. So he does know some of you, and hopefully we'll get to know all of you better as we move out of the pandemic and we can resume in-person events. Also, you'll hear from Dave Kraska. He is the program coordinator at the Willamette Water Supply Program. And he'll be talking a lot more about what that is, but that is a significant event going on at Tualatin Valley Water as well as the region in terms of water supply. And then you'll hear from Paul Matthews. He's our Chief Financial Officer. And then we will have some roundtable at the end where you can have an opportunity to share. So here are their faces. I know many of them are waving. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Hickman, CEO.
Thank you, Andrea. And I do look forward to being able to meet all of you in person. It was one of those things that I think this is a really important meeting to have and to have a personal connection with. So I look forward to being able to do that in the future. Just a little bit about me. So I came on board in August of 2019. And then 6 months later, got to try to find the playbook of how do you deal with a pandemic as a water district. So, and we've been writing it ever since. Prior to that, I was with the city of Bend for 14 years, almost 15 years. And in that position, I was the director of engineering and infrastructure planning for the city of Bend. Prior to that, I was a consultant with David Evans and Associates, and then prior to that with a firm down in California called MBK Engineers. So I'm thrilled to be here. I definitely look forward to different times. These have been a very challenging couple of years to step into this seat. It's been interesting. I'm sure it's been interesting for many of you. Why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide there, Andrea?
Okay, and if anyone does want to take control, you're welcome.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I haven't had my coffee. I hope the rest of you are having your coffee. I'm working on my first cup here. So, look, we're going to give away the whole show right here. So we, as many of you know, are working on the Willamette Water Supply Project. And we recently got bid results that were alarming. And we've been impacted by the inflation and a number of supply chain issues. You're going to hear all about this in a moment. But here's the big takeaway is that the increases in two bids essentially, have resulted in a $315 million increase to the project. That was not something that we had anticipated or expected. So it took the project from 1.3 billion to 1.6 billion. As many of you know, this is a joint project that we're working with the city of Hillsborough and city of Beaverton on. but you know, at the end of the day, what this results in is an approximately impact to our customers of our share of that 315 million is about $200 million. There, you know, we had done a lot of work to try to put ourselves in a position to deal with any kind of inflationary or increases. But this was outside that band, and you're going to hear from our Chief Financial Officer here, Paul Matthews, who's going to talk a little bit about that and what we did ahead of time, or what we tried to do, and then kind of where we're at now. So with that, I am going to let Dave Kraska, he is our program director for the Willamette Water Supply, and I'm going to let him take you through some of the nuanced details here of where we're at with the project and the challenges that we face.
All right, thank you, Tom. So Tom gave you the kind of punch in the gut there in terms of like what this presentation is about, even before you had your coffee. So I've been sharing a lot of bad news over the last couple of months, but to begin my presentation, I'm going to turn the clock back a little bit and try to remind everybody, how did we even get started on this path to begin with? Because this is a major undertaking that none of these agencies took lightly. It started about 10 years ago with a study in 2013 independently by TVWD in the city of Hillsborough to evaluate their long-term water supply options. And if you look at this graphic on the right-hand side, you'll see kind of our area and the four options that were considered by these agencies in terms of selecting their long-term water supply. And when we talk about long-term water supply, we're talking like 100 years. We're talking about really long-term, where's the water going to be coming from? And so these agencies looked at, just starting from the top, a groundwater supply, a new groundwater supply to the north in the Salvi Island area, increasing additional purchases from Portland, going to the Willamette River, and then number 4 was increasing storage at Hag Lake, which would increase supply through the Joint Water Commission system. And essentially, all of these systems and options were evaluated in terms of the infrastructure required to implement them, the environmental impacts, the costs, and so on. And ultimately, both Hillsborough and TVWD selected going to the Willamette for these reasons. Lower cost of the options considered. This was actually the lowest cost option for the long-term water supply. Excellent water quality. The water supply from the Willamette River is excellent, as proven by, at this point now, 2 decades of use at the cities of Wilsonville and Sherwood. It provides an ownership opportunity of the water supply to the TVWD service area and Hillsborough in terms of having water rights to the Willamette River and owning the entire supply system. It's a reliable supply, and fewer environmental impacts in terms of implementing this option had lower environmental impacts than the others that were considered. So with that decision made, then that initiated the planning and permitting and design and all the efforts needed to figure out the infrastructure needed in order to supply water from the Willamette River. And this is what we ended up with after years of study and engineering and everything. Is we start with a Willamette River intake located in Wilsonville. It's actually an existing intake for the Willamette River water treatment plant down there, and we are expanding it and increasing the seismic resiliency of that intake. A new state-of-the-art water treatment plant in Sherwood, more than 30 miles of large diameter pipeline from the Willamette River to the treatment plant in Sherwood, and then from there to the distribution systems of Hillsborough and TVWD. And as I mentioned, it's been Hillsborough and TVWD initially that initiated this whole project. And Beaverton signed on, I believe it was in 2018. Then finally, 2 water storage tanks are planned in the Cooper Mountain area. We're only going to build one initially, again, as a cost-saving measure, as Tom Hickman alluded to. So we'll build one now and the second one in the future. So that's the overall system that we're designing. If you go to our website, ourreliablewater.org, you'll see a map that looks like this. It is the exact same system infrastructure that's shown on the prior graphic. This one's a lot more colorful, and what the colors indicate are the individual projects that we broke up the overall program into. And the reason that we broke it up into these individual projects is we looked at what we call the bonding capacity of the various contractors in the area and tried to right size these projects in terms of the bonding capacity of the contractors, both locally and also which would encourage competition from national contractors. And that's kind of a theme that we've implemented from the beginning of the program back when we started in 2015, is to maximize competition on all of the work occurring on the program. We feel, aside from value engineering and in the details, we really feel that maximizing competition on everything that we're doing on the program is really our best opportunity to control costs on the program. And to date, it had worked out very well. In terms of the work that we've completed to date, since, as I mentioned, we've been in operation on the program since 2015. Our first construction project began in 2016. And since that time, we've completed 6 pipeline projects, as indicated here on this map. All 6 of these projects, you can see they kind of span kind of all up and down the area that we're going to be building infrastructure. The reason that we're performing the program in this way, this kind of hopscotch sort of pattern, is that these projects were performed in terms of what we call opportunity projects. And what that means is where an agency was doing road work, where we were going to be building our pipeline, we hurried up and got our work done while they were there. So for example, the PLM 3.0 project at 124th Avenue, you see that kind of on the right side of this graphic, that was Washington County was going to build the extension of 124th Avenue. And so we saw that as the same alignment as our pipeline. So we hurried up with our design work so we could combine our project with theirs and do the project together. Save a lot of money doing that everywhere that we possibly could, and also reduce the public impacts of our work. So that's why we've gotten 6.5 miles of pipeline work done so far. To date, we've spent about $350 million on the program. Part of that is here. Part of that is here and the construction work that's ongoing. The projects that we currently have in construction, our raw water facilities project down in Wilsonville, a couple of pipeline projects along our Tualatin Sherwood Road and Roy Rogers Road, and then up in the Cornelius Pass area. And then we also have work MPE 1.1 and 1.2. Those projects are occurring on Shoals Ferry Road. And the MPE 1.1 project is another opportunity project with the city of Beaverton, combining their road work project with our pipeline project. Now, if I fast forward a year from now, this map of active construction projects will look like this. So right now we're heading into the heavy construction period of the program, where the remaining projects that we have to build are going to be under construction. And we knew this date was coming all along the way. As I mentioned, we were getting as many projects done as we could as we went along, but we had to design all the rest of it, and here we are. So in order to get to this point, we have to bid all of our remaining projects. So finish design and then advertise them and bid them. And this is the graphic that shows basically how those cascade out. Across the top, we have 2021, 2022. So this graphic starts in November of last year and continues on through August of this year. And so this shows all of the remaining projects on the left-hand side that we have to bid and when they will be bid. And you can see there's kind of a cascade to this graphic, and that's very intentional. We didn't want to bid all of our projects all at once because we have contractors that are going to want to bid on multiple projects. So we spread them out this way so that we can maximize competition on our projects. Now, if you look on the left-hand side of this graphic, you see kind of the order of these projects being bid. And so 2 of our largest projects, our Res 1.0 PLM 5.3 project, that's a reservoir project on Cooper Mountain, and it's tied to a large pipeline project, and our water treatment plant project. Those are 2 of our largest projects and 2 that bid recently, basically toward the end of last year. And as Tom mentioned, we got some bad news, some significantly bad news on those bids. Before I get into this, I'll say we were performing great in terms of fiscal performance on the program. If you look at the original estimates on the project from that decision back in 2013, the estimate back at that time was that this was going to cost about $1 billion in 2013 dollars. When you escalate that to under normal circumstances to today, that would be about $1.2, $1.3 billion, and we were right on track with that until these two bids came in. And so the reservoir and pipeline project, the estimated cost for that one in our baseline, what we call our budget, was 117 million, and the bid price, the negotiated bid price for that work, again in a competitive environment, 143 million. So $26 million above budget. Water treatment plant was even worse. Our estimated cost for that one was 292 million, and that was an estimate that was produced even with contractor input. So we asked contractors to provide input in terms of where we thought this bid was going to come in, and then when we finished bidding it, again in a competitive environment, the bids came in a negotiated value of about $427 million. So this was really eye-opening to us. It was really brought home just what the heck is going on in terms of the inflationary impacts and all the supply chain issues and increased labor costs, increased materials costs, and so on, what it means to us. So we took, now obviously, if you add those two numbers up and the deltas on those two numbers, it doesn't add up to $315 million. So what we did is by getting this information at the end of last year, we did a look at the remaining projects that we have to bid on the program and try to figure out what is the cost risk on the overall program in this new environment. And what we're forecasting is it could be as much as $315 million. And so this is the information that my team generated that I've been communicating to TVWD, Beaverton, and Hillsborough in terms of the potential cost risk on the program going forward. And as Tom mentioned, so instead of talking about a $1.3 billion project that we have been talking about for some time, now we're estimating it could be as much as a $1.6 billion program. As we've talked about, TVWD is not alone in paying for this. There are partners, and so this is how we're estimating it breaks out by partner. And the way this breakout works is that Beaverton, Hillsborough, TVWD, and let me just stay with those. Those three partners own different elements, different capacities of the various components of the overall infrastructure that we're building. TVWD is the largest share owner, and so it's the cost increase to TVWD on this chart is about $192 million. You'll hear us talk a lot today about $200 million increase, and so that's basically rounding that number up. That last, so everyone's aware, the WIF partners, the WIF partners, that is the Willamette Intake Facilities Commission. So that is a collection of agencies that includes Beaverton, Hillsborough, and TVWD. But you also add on to that the cities of Wilsonville, Sherwood, and Tiger. They all have an ownership stake on the intake on the Willamette River. So there's a separate partners, separate ownership party there, and there's a $600,000 cost increase that we're forecasting for that work as well. I think that's the last of my slides, and so now I'm going to pass it on to Paul to take over and explain what this means for TVWD's financials. Take it away, Paul.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, so given the increase in cost, we're going to have to adjust our financial strategy to afford this investment. The district produces a financial plan on an annual basis, and the most recently approved financial plan by our board is shown here with the gray bars showing our capital outlays by year. The red bars is what would be required with the adjustments to our CIP, including from the Willamette Water Supply Program. So as you can see, our capital outlays are concentrated between 2022 and 2025 when the program is in its large construction phase, as Dave described. So we're seeing a rather large increase in our capital outlays that are required in this near-term period. We've been planning for a period of large capital outlays between 2022 and 2026, but the magnitude and the change is much greater than what we had planned for. So if you look down at the table part of this slide, you'll see that the far right total, we're showing about $199 million increase, and that accounts for some of the other capital projects that TVWD has to fully integrate the Willamette Water Supply Program into the district's water delivery system, as well as some other changes that have happened within the program, the timing of certain projects. But the bottom line is I've been given the task of funding an extra $200 million of capital outlays over the next 10-year period. This chart shows how we intended to fund this. The top panel there is the currently adopted or approved financial plan that was approved last May by our board. And it showed a breakdown of how we're going to fund it with cash and debt. So the district has so far funded the entire its entire investment in the Willamette Water Supply Program with cash, and the district has just under $100 million of capacity in its loan with the EPA, its low interest WIFIA loan that we can draw on at any time. But if you look here, you'll see that the numbers I have circled here show what we had planned in debt proceeds. You'll see that under the current financial plan, or the approved financial plan, we're assuming borrowing about $408 million. We have a $388 million WIFIA loan. We're looking at another $20 million of traditional revenue bonds, and that gets us into that neighborhood of $408 million. Now, given the additional cost that we have from the program, we're going to have to change our rate profile somewhat, and we're looking at borrowing about $600 million to fund the entire program. As we prepared the current financial plan and our biennial budget, we made a lot of adjustments in our capital outlays, our material service budget, and our personnel service budget because of the effects of COVID-19 and the effects it had on our customers. And what I want to show here is just the magnitude of this $200 million increase. First of all, I'm showing up at the top that additional debt financing of $205 million. That includes some money that we would need to borrow to fund debt reserves and so forth. The technical details aren't really important, but if we were to borrow an extra $205 million, it would result in about $12 million per year in annual debt service. And if we look at our how that lays out in our budget, this red line shows kind of where it is in that. The first bar that you see there is our material and services budget. So that's all the postage, professional services, power, purchased water, all those costs are considered material and services budget. And the $12 million would consume half of that. It's just not possible for us to reduce our material and service budget and operate the district to fund that $12 million increase. If we look at our personnel services budget, $21.2 million, that pays for all of our people, it pays for the benefits and so forth, about $21.2 million. And again, the 12 million is more than half of that. And the last is what we call the in-district CIP. That's the CIP that is not within the Willamette Water Supply Program, but that is used to maintain our transmission system, all the pump stations, reservoirs, and all the other facilities that we have to provide water to our customers. That'd be just slightly under half of that. Now, it is possible we could break up that 12 million, take some from each of these buckets. But the fact is, when we went through our financial plan and budgeting process for the biennium, we did reschedule 50 million of capital improvements, for example, out into the future to account for the effects that COVID-19 was having on our customers. So we did make a lot of adjustments, and we picked the low-hanging fruit, and that's kind of where we stand at this point in time. This additional borrowing, and I'm not going to get into the technical details of what net leverage is, but this borrowing adjusts how much revenue the district needs in order to have the debt capacity to borrow the $600 million. And what's shown here is what we call our net leverage ratio. The gray line that you see there was our forecast of our net revenue under the approved 21-23 financial plan. The red line that you see would be under the current forecast that we have. Now, a lower number is better than a higher number in this case when you're looking at this financial metric. And, you know, the industry standard is typically about 7 is the highest that you would go. When we talk to our bond rating agencies, 7 is kind of the highest that is recommended. We have a district policy of 8. And so the plan that we have actually exceeds that. And I'm comfortable with that because it's actually over a short period of time. And we have a story to explain to the bond rating agencies of how our transition from Portland to TVWD will bring our net leverage down. So the point of this isn't to get into all the details of how we calculate our net leverage, but it's to let you know that that we are stretching and that we are not being incredibly, as we set our rates, we are allowing this net leverage to go up to keep the rates as low as possible, but still maintaining it within a reasonable range so that we won't have adverse effect on our credit rating. Shown here are the rate options that we are looking at, and these would be just percentage changes in rates. And the first item that you see there in the table down below in the gray line in the figure itself is what we had produced in the 21-23 financial plan. So the district already has adopted a 9.5% rate increase that will go into effect November 1st of this year, 2022, for fiscal year 23. And then we estimated about 4% rate increases for the following years after that. If we look at keeping that 9.5% rate increase this year, it would require that we have 15% rate increases over the next 2 years to fund the entire program to get sufficient revenue in to both cash fund the capital outlay as well as support the debt service that we'd have on the borrowed funds. That's option A. Option B would be to make an adjustment to our rate increase to be effective on November 1st this year and smooth it out over a 3-year period. These are options that we presented to our Board of Commissioners, and it's something that we will be working over the next several months to figure out the best direction for the district's customers. Having said that, part of our conversation with you here today is to get feedback on the options that we may want to pursue. So we'll ask that during the roundtable questions. I do need to point out that there are risks to this forecast, and every time I present a financial forecast to our board, I want to emphasize that there are risks, and these are forecasts that are subject to change. And some of the important ones that we have are interest rates and inflation. Just on Monday, I think, if I remember correctly, the producer price index went up 9.7% year over year. So inflation is having a dramatic impact on our bids and our cost. And in fact, that's the principal driver of where we are here. But it will also likely affect interest rates over the longer term. As the Fed adjusts its policies to combat inflation, interest rates are likely to go up. And as borrowers understand that future returns will be subject to inflation, they may require a higher return on their investments. So we are anticipating that. However, future inflation being beyond what it is could affect our borrowing cost. It could affect the WWSP capital cost. And as important, the other in-district capital projects that we have, they may be subject to the same kinds of bid results that Dave Kraska talked about for the water supply program. The other thing I want to point out here is schedule risk, that if we delay projects further, given the inflationary environment, the cost then goes up even further for us, and we need to be cognizant that we don't delay projects and end up actually paying more for them. And the last item on this list is the inflationary impact on our operating expenses. We need to continue to monitor those, but some of these inflationary impacts may affect, for example, the cost of pumping power that we use to pump water in the district. And so we'll be watching that very carefully. The other item that we have on the list here is the future cost of water. This is a long-term financial plan, and we're looking out the impact on our operating results. And an important part of that is the cost of water. So we have an estimate of what the future cost of water will be coming from the new water supply program, but those costs are subject to these same inflationary environments that we've talked about as well. And then we have future revenues that we continue to monitor. Customer growth within our system that adds demands to our system, as well as system development charges. So we want to monitor that. And we're very concerned about the affordability of water and the impact that it can have on our customers and collections. As water becomes more expensive, there's a good many of our customers who can afford it and without much of a challenge, but we do have customers that will not be able to afford their water, and we need to be cognizant of that. Our board took action in the last budget cycle. It increased the district's contribution to our Customer Emergency Assistance Fund from about $15,000 a year up to over $250,000 per year in anticipation of customers having challenges paying their water bills. And then the last item I have here are what we call black swan events. And I say that we're experiencing one right now with all the global supply chain inflationary impacts that we've seen. But those are still out there. We are implementing a new customer information system. The project's going excellent, but those are challenging projects, and we're watching that closely as well. A pandemic. We've got the current pandemic. Is there another pandemic? Black swan events are by definition unknowable, so we have recent experience there, and are concerned about that. War and the impact that might have on our complex supply chain issues, and other events out there. So it's just important as we look at these numbers that we have a little bit of caution that it's easier to write a number, calculate a number, than it is to know exactly what the long-term consequences of these risks will be. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Tom Hickman.
Thank you, Paul. So I know we've been hitting you with a lot of sunshine this morning. So we have been working on some alternative funding and trying to find ways. And this is where you may be able to help us. So one of the things I've been pointing out with this project is, despite its significance to the state and national economy, because it's creating a seismically resilient water supply, it's received no grant dollars. We did get a low interest loan, and that we appreciated, and we do appreciate, but we've not gotten any kind of any really national or federal assistance on a grant level. So we have been working hard with our lobbyists and trying to see if with all the infrastructure funds that are coming out, to see if we can't get some of that money directed to this project. We have made a request from the state legislature for $75 million. And we're looking to also get $5 million of that designated for residential customer assistance. So we have currently, for TVWD, we have, I think the number's somewhere around 1,600, 1,700 customers that COVID has hit particularly hard. They fell behind, and they're really struggling to be able to catch up. And this $5 million would help those most in need. But certainly the 70 or 75 million, depending upon how the state would do it, would help with rates. We also did get a new WIFIA loan because we do have projects internal to the district that aren't part of the Willamette that we have to do. We have aging infrastructure, just like any business would, that we have to address. And so we did get another low interest WIFIA loan. And for $16 million to help us with some of that critical internal infrastructure. We also looks like we're going to be able to get a grant of $11 million. We're working on it for one of those critical infrastructure projects, and we're at least hoping to. And then we've also made a request from the Bureau of Reclamation for $2 million of grant funding for automated metering infrastructure. And that's a whole nother story. That's another project, but it's one we're pushing out and trying to phase over time to get to automated metering infrastructure. So with that, and I'm sorry, before I move on, I would like to also, I mentioned this is where you can come in. So our request at the state legislature is currently moving through this short session. But what would be helpful is to have letters of support, letters that from all of you and your businesses to our state legislators supporting this request. So to the extent that you are comfortable doing that, we would much appreciate it, as well as all the rest of the customers. And if there's additional information we can provide on that, of what that letter would look like, we'd happily provide that to you. So now with that, I am going to say that's the end of our presentation. Turn this back over to Andrea, and I think we're ready to field questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much again for joining us. We're going to stop the recording here for those customers who weren't able to join us today so they can receive this information. And then we are going